Story 1. The Cannibal's Kitchen. Inside. Whispering Pines' horrifying cuisine. In the shadowy alleys of East Village, there stood a quaint restaurant that whispered secrets of the old world, named Whispering Pines. Despite its small size, the buzz about its exotic dishes had reached the far corners of the foodie community. The rumors not only spoke of the unique flavors, but hinted at a darker secret, one that pulled in the curious and the brave. James, a true culinary adventurer and a well-known food critic, was always on the hunt for the next big story. The enigmatic tales surrounding Whispering Pines piqued his interest, pushing him to experience it for himself. One stormy evening, he made his way to the dimly lit entrance of the restaurant. The sign swayed eerily as the wind howled, a premonition of what was to come. Inside, the ambience was rustic with an air of nostalgia. Antique lanterns hung from the ceiling, casting ghostly shadows against the wooden walls adorned with portraits of unsmiling figures. The host, an elderly man with a gaunt face and piercing eyes, led James to his table with a stiff politeness that felt almost rehearsed. James opted for the chef's special without a second thought, a decision that patrons of Whispering Pines often made. The dish was a meat pie, known among the locals for its rich flavor and tender meat that melted in the mouth, a recipe said to have been passed down through generations. As he took his first bite, the flavors exploded on his palate, savory and slightly sweet, unlike anything he had ever tasted. Curiosity overcame him, and he summoned the chef, hoping to learn more about this exceptional dish. The chef, a middle-aged woman with a warm smile yet tired eyes, approached his table. "It's an old family recipe," she explained. "We use a special kind of pork, marinated with herbs from our garden." The explanation seemed mundane, but James noticed a flicker of hesitance in her eyes. Pushed by his instincts, he pressed further, complimenting the dish and innocently inquiring about the supply of such unique pork. The chef paused, her expression darkening. "It's locally sourced," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Very local." That night, as James lay in his hotel room, he couldn't shake off the unsettling feeling the chef's words had instilled in him. Something was not right. The flavors, her hesitation, the mysterious ambiance of the restaurant. It all felt like pieces of a sinister puzzle. His thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. It was a small boy, no older than 10, looking pale and frightened. "Please, sir, you must help me," he pleaded. "My sister went to the Whispering Pines a week ago and never returned. They say people disappear there." Chilled to the bone but driven by a newfound resolve, James decided to investigate further. The next morning, under the guise of writing a feature article, he visited the restaurant again. The elderly host, recognizing him, seemed visibly unsettled by his return. This time, James was led to a different part of the restaurant, to a basement under the pretext of seeing the wine collection. As they descended the creaky stairs, the air grew colder, and the faint but unmistakable scent of decay brushed against his senses. The basement was dimly lit, lined with barrels and boxes. As the host busied himself at the far end of the room, James' attention was drawn to a heavy, iron-bound door. It was slightly ajar. Peering inside, what he saw made his blood run cold, a horrifying tableau of human bodies, some whole, some not, all preserved in chilling detail. He stumbled back, horror-stricken, as the host turned around, his expression no longer hiding the malevolent satisfaction of a predator who had just cornered his prey.
"You should not have come back,"
the man hissed, advancing with a sinister gleam in his eye. James's survival instincts kicked in. He hurled a nearby wine bottle at the host, stunning him long enough to make a run for the stairs. Bursting out of the basement, he didn't stop until he reached the safety of the crowded street, panting and disheveled. The police were called, and the grim truth about Whispering Pines unraveled. The chef and the host were arrested, revealing a ghastly practice of using human meat in their dishes, sourcing their victims from the lonely souls who wandered into their establishment. The story shook the community to its core, a chilling reminder of the depths of human depravity hidden beneath the veneer of tradition and fine dining. James, although hailed as a hero for unveiling the horror, could never erase the haunting flavors of that meal, nor the ghosts of those who had unknowingly dined at Whispering Pines. Story 2. The Taste Test. Unveiling the secrets of zum alten Fritz. In the heart of East Germany, nestled within the historic streets of Dresden, stood Zum Alten Fritz, a restaurant famed not only for its delectable cuisine, but also for its uncanny ability to predict culinary trends with eerie precision. It was a place wrapped in intrigue, where the elite and adventurous food lovers alike would gather to taste the future of gastronomy. Eric, an ambitious food blogger known for his keen palate and fearless critiques, had long been curious about Zum Alten Fritz's unparalleled success. His chance to delve into its secrets came when he received a coveted invitation to their exclusive monthly tasting event, a gathering rumored to showcase not only new dishes, but also to test them on unwitting patrons. As Eric approached the quaint timber-framed building, he was struck by the buzzing atmosphere. The smell of rich spices mixed with an underlying scent he couldn't quite place filled the air, setting his senses on edge. He was greeted by the owner, Herr Schmidt, a man whose reputation for innovation was shadowed by whispers of unorthodox methods. The evening began with a series of dishes, each more exotic than the last. There was a stew that tingled with a strange metallic aftertaste and a pâté that left a lingering numbness on the tongue. As the courses progressed, Eric noticed the guests around him growing increasingly effusive in their praise, their eyes glossy and their speech slightly slurred. Suspicious, Eric excused himself to explore the kitchen under the guise of lavishing praise upon the chef. What he found was a stark, almost clinical space, far removed from the warm, rustic dining area. The shelves were lined with vials and containers bearing cryptic labels. In the corner, a locked freezer hummed ominously. His investigation was cut short as Herr Schmidt appeared, his geniality replaced by a cold alertness. "Curiosity can be a dangerous thing," he remarked, leading Eric back to the dining room. Back at his table, a new dish was being served, a pie with a rich crimson filling. As he ate, Eric's head began to spin, his thoughts muddled. The chatter around him seemed distant, as though he were underwater. He struggled to focus on his surroundings, his vision blurring at the edges. Realizing something was terribly wrong, Eric attempted to stand, only to find his body unresponsive. Panic set in as he overheard snippets of conversation from the adjoining table. "Remarkable how it simplifies them, makes them so malleable," one guest said, a smirk playing on his lips. "Indeed," another agreed. "Herr Schmidt's culinary experiments are unparalleled. It's a new frontier in behavioral modification." It dawned on Eric that the dishes were not merely experimental in flavor, but in effect. The restaurant was using its patrons as test subjects for some form of pharmacological control administered through the food. The realization hit him like a wave as the room spun faster. Desperate, he tried to call out, to warn the others, but his voice was no more than a whisper. Around him, the guests continued to eat, oblivious or uncaring, their wills subdued by the concoctions they had ingested. As the evening drew to a close, the effects of the dishes began to wear off slightly, allowing Eric just enough clarity to grasp his phone and send a message to a fellow blogger. With trembling fingers, he typed, "Investigate Zum Alten Fritz. Dangerous. Do not let this go." Eric's last memory of that night was the sight of Herr Schmidt approached him, a syringe in hand, his expression devoid of empathy. "Such a shame you won't remember any of this," he heard before darkness engulfed him. Days later, Eric woke up in his bed, his last memories fragmented. His blog and social media accounts had been scrubbed clean of any mention of 𝐒𝐈𝐚. Confused and disoriented, he noticed an unusual scar on his arm, with no recollection of how it came to be. Determined to uncover the truth, Eric revisited the restaurant, only to find it permanently closed, with no trace of Herr Schmidt or his experimental cuisine. Left with more questions than answers, Eric could not shake the unnerving feeling that he had narrowly escaped a fate far worse than mere forgetfulness, and that the implications of what happened at 𝐒𝐈𝐴 were far-reaching and horrifyingly real. Story 3. The Secret Spice. The Hypnotic Allure of the Hollow Oak. In the heart of the English countryside, nestled between rolling hills and dense woodlands, there existed a quaint eatery known only to the locals as the Hollow Oak. This small, seemingly unremarkable diner was tucked away on an old winding road rarely traveled by anyone not native to the area. It was run by a solitary figure, a middle-aged man named Malcolm, who was both the chef and owner. Malcolm was a man of few words and even fewer smiles. He had a knack for preparing dishes that left patrons coming back, despite the diner's remote location. The secret, it seemed, lay in the unique spices he used, which were unknown to even the most distinguished chefs in nearby towns. It wasn't just the flavors that kept the customers returning, but the inexplicable feeling of bliss and contentment that washed over them with each visit. Emma, a young journalist with a passion for uncovering hidden gems in rural England, stumbled upon the Hollow Oak during a weekend getaway. Intrigued by the mysterious aura that seemed to envelop the diner, she decided to investigate further. She planned to write a feature article about the place, suspecting it might just be the perfect story for her portfolio. Upon her arrival, Malcolm served her a plate of his signature dish, shepherd's pie. It was exquisite, with flavors she couldn't quite place, but that made her feel unusually calm and happy. As she ate, she observed the other patrons, noting their serene expressions and slow, deliberate movements. Something felt off, but the soothing effects of the meal made it hard for her to focus on her initial suspicion. Deciding to delve deeper, Emma asked Malcolm about his culinary techniques and the unique ingredients he used. Malcolm was reticent but mentioned that he grew most of his herbs in a small garden behind the diner. Emma requested a tour of the garden, hoping to learn more about these mysterious herbs. Malcolm hesitated, but eventually agreed. As they walked through the garden, Emma noticed a variety of common herbs, but one particular patch was isolated and covered with a protective net. Malcolm quickly steered her away when she moved to inspect it. His nervous reaction piqued her curiosity further. Back inside, Emma's mind felt increasingly foggy, and her initial alertness turned into a lethargic bliss. She couldn't shake the feeling that Malcolm's food had something to do with the tranquil atmosphere of the diner. Determined to uncover the truth, she made an excuse to revisit the kitchen, claiming she needed to grab the notepad she had forgotten there. In the kitchen, Emma rummaged through Malcolm's pantry when he was briefly called away to the front. Hidden behind stacks of common spices, she found small, unlabeled bottles filled with a fine white powder. Her heart raced as she pocketed one of the bottles, planning to have it tested. Malcolm returned before she could inspect anything else. His demeanor had shifted subtly. The genial host facade had slipped, revealing a wary sharpness in his eyes. Emma left soon after, the euphoric fog slowly lifting as she drove away from the Hollow Oak. At her lab contact, tests revealed the shocking truth. The powder was a potent hypnotic agent, likely inducing the patrons' serene states and influencing their repeated visits. Armed with her findings, Emma returned to the diner, but Malcolm and the Hollow Oak were gone. In its place was just an empty lot, as if the diner had never existed. Her story, published under the title The Enchantment of the Hollow Oak, ignited a firestorm of intrigue and fear. Readers were captivated and horrified by the revelation that a simple roadside diner could harbor such dark secrets. Emma's article not only catapulted her into journalistic fame, but also warned others about the unseen dangers lurking in seemingly innocent places.